Imagine a world stretched from the edges of India to the shores of the Mediterranean. A world stitched together by roads, ruled by satraps, and commanded by a single man, Darius I, King of Kings. But before the title, before the power, before the wars that shook empires, there was a younger man standing in the shadow of a collapsing dynasty. Darius was born around 550 BCE, the son of Hystaspes, a nobleman of the Achaemenid family and a loyal general under Cyrus the Great. Unlike Cyrus, whose rise was forged through rebellion, Darius's claim to the throne would come amid political chaos and deadly intrigue. When Cyrus fell in battle and his son Cambyses II inherited the empire, Darius served as a royal spear-bearer, a prestigious but subordinate position. Cambyses, however, was plagued by paranoia and trouble. During his campaign in Egypt, news came of a man claiming to be Bardia, Cambyses' brother, seizing power back in Persia. But here's the twist. Cambyses had secretly killed Bardia years earlier. This Bardia was actually an impostor, a magus named Gaumata. When Cambyses died, allegedly by suicide, Darius and 6 other nobles conspired to end the usurpation. The plot succeeded. Gaumata was assassinated, and in 522 BCE, Darius, though not a direct heir, proclaimed himself king, claiming divine approval from Ahura Mazda and Achaemenid lineage. But taking the throne was only the beginning. Rebellions erupted across the empire. Babylon, Media, Elam, Egypt, each province challenging the legitimacy of this new ruler. Darius didn't back down. He crushed each rebellion ruthlessly, often commemorating his victories with inscriptions carved into rock. None more famous than the Behistun inscription, a sprawling record of his triumphs, written in 3 languages, high above the cliffs of western Iran. It was his declaration to history. I am not merely a ruler. I am the rightful ruler. While known best for his military campaigns, Darius III was equally a statesman and a master administrator. Once the rebellions were quelled, he focused on transforming the Achaemenid Empire into a finely tuned machine. He divided the empire into satrapies, provinces each governed by a satrap who reported directly to the king. He established a system of taxation, ensured justice through imperial laws, and built a network of royal roads, enabling communication across thousands of miles. He even introduced a standardized currency, the gold daric, facilitating trade across the known world. Darius's empire wasn't just big, it was connected. One of his boldest undertakings? Commissioning the construction of a new capital, Persepolis, a city not just of stone, but of symbolism, where delegations from across the empire brought tribute to the king during the New Year festival. While Darius wouldn't live to see its completion, Persepolis would become a jewel of imperial architecture and a symbol of Persian majesty. And still, his ambitions stretched further. Darius had Egypt under control, with infrastructure projects including a canal linking the Nile to the Red Sea. His eyes turned east, where he campaigned into parts of India. But it was in the west, in the lands of the Greeks, that Darius faced his most persistent enemy. The trouble began with the Ionian cities on the western coast of Asia Minor, culturally Greek but under Persian rule. In 499 BCE, under the leadership of Aristagoras of Miletus, these cities revolted. They sought support from mainland Greece, and Athens responded. The Athenians sent ships and soldiers. Together, they marched inland and burned Sardis, a Persian regional capital. Darius was furious. Not only had his subjects rebelled, but foreign city-states had dared interfere. The revolt was eventually crushed by Persian forces, but Darius never forgot the insult. He famously ordered a servant to whisper to him daily, "Master, remember the Athenians." What followed was the first of the Greco-Persian Wars, a massive effort to bring the Greek city-states to heel. In 492 BCE, Darius launched his first campaign against Greece. The army, led by his son-in-law Mardonius, was well prepared, but disaster struck early. A violent storm near Mount Athos wrecked much of the Persian fleet, forcing a retreat. The gods, it seemed, favored the Greeks, for now, undeterred, Darius planned a second attempt, this time targeting Athens and Eretria directly. In 490 BCE, a massive Persian fleet set sail across the Aegean. They subdued the island of Naxos and laid siege to Eretria, which fell after 6 days of resistance. The Persians sacked the city, enslaving its people. Now, only one city remained in Darius's sights: Athens. The Persian forces landed at the Bay of Marathon, a flat coastal plain perfect for cavalry. Opposing them stood the Athenian army, vastly outnumbered, but determined. Their leader, Miltiades, understood that delay would doom them. So the Athenians struck first. It was September 490 BCE. The two forces faced each other under the searing Greek sun. The Persian army, made up of infantry and cavalry from across the empire, Medes, Persians, Saka, and others, stood confident. But then the unexpected happened. The Athenian hoplites charged the Persian lines, running the length of the plain in tight phalanx formation. Their bronze armor and long spears pierced through the lightly armored Persian infantry. The Persians held briefly, but cracks formed in their center. While the Persian wings pushed forward, the Athenian center fell back, a tactical feint. The Greek flanks then enveloped the Persians in a classic double envelopment. Panic erupted. Within hours, it was over. The Persians fled back to their ships. Herodotus reports that around 6,400 Persians lay dead on the field, while the Athenians lost only 192. A runner, possibly named Phidippides, was said to have sprinted from Marathon to Athens, announcing victory with a single word before collapsing. "Nikomen, we have won." Though the legend may be myth, the symbolism endures. The victory was not just military, it was psychological. A city-state of farmers, artisans, and philosophers had turned back the most powerful empire the world had ever known. Darius was stunned by the defeat, but not broken. Plans for a third, much larger invasion began almost immediately. He would lead it personally. The new campaign would not just punish Athens, it would crush all of Greece. But fate intervened. A rebellion erupted in Egypt in 486 BCE. As Darius prepared to deal with it, his health began to decline. He never returned to Greece. Instead, he died that year, having ruled the empire for 36 years. He was buried in a rock-cut tomb at Nakshi Rostam, near Persepolis, an eternal monument carved high in the cliffs, depicting him holding a bow before the symbols of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism. His legacy was inherited by his son, Xerxes III, the king who would avenge his father at Thermopylae and Salamis. Darius, I was more than a warrior. He was a builder, an administrator, and a visionary. He created one of the first true multinational empires, where local cultures were largely respected under a unifying structure. His inscriptions, especially at Behistun, stand as early forms of imperial propaganda and linguistic heritage. The trilingual nature of the Behistun inscription, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, would centuries later help modern scholars decipher cuneiform, much like the Rosetta Stone did for Egyptian hieroglyphs. His construction of the Royal Road helped shape ancient trade routes, setting the foundation for the later Silk Road. His gold coinage unified economies. His reforms in law and governance influenced generations of imperial rule. But it was his clash with the Greeks and his defeat at Marathon that immortalized him in Western memory. While Darius I does not appear as frequently in popular culture as his son Xerxes, he still finds his place in historical media, films and TV. In 300 Rise of an Empire, 2014, there is brief mention of his death and the legacy passed to Xerxes, though it's highly stylized and historically inaccurate. Video games. Assassin's Creed Odyssey includes references to Persian invasions and the conflict between Greece and Persia. Total War, Rome, Sectu. While focused on later eras, mods exist that include Achaemenid factions and figures like Darius. Darius was a king who ruled not just through conquest, but through order. His vision of empire laid the blueprint for imperial administration that would echo through Rome, Byzantium, and beyond. His greatest defeat at Marathon became his most remembered legacy. But his greatest success was building an empire that lasted long after him. From mountain fortresses to coastal plains, from golden coins to carved stone, Darius left his mark on history. Not just in battles fought, but in systems built.